Hey, I'm Maybe Burke, and you're watching Makeup for Lost Time. This is my makeup series for trans women and other people who feel like they missed a few classes when it came to learning about makeup. And today we're going to talk about foundations, and I have so many. I took 2 weeks off because I had COVID, but I am back, and we've gone over a lot of different components of makeup that you can wear on its own. This is going to be the first thing that we're covering that I don't recommend just doing foundation alone, but we're going to start moving into complexion products and ways that we can play around with the whole face. Now, there's only so many ways you can put on foundation, but the real trick is finding the right foundation for you. And that's not just a matter of the shade of foundation that you're wearing, but also the amount of coverage that you want from your foundation and the finish that you want. There are matte finishes, there are dewy finishes, there are like satin finishes and glowy finishes, a lot of different types of foundations out there. So finding the ones that work best for you. Now, the good news is you can go into an Ulta or a Sephora and have the people there shade match you and find the right shade for you, and they'll ask you other questions about your skin type to find the right type of foundation for you. The bad news is you can't do that with drugstore brands. You're not going to be able to try on and find the right shade, but if you go to an Ulta, usually they'll still help you find what works best for you. And so, of course, coverage and finish are really going to be personal choice. We're going to focus mostly on shade and making sure we can know how to find the right color for you. So I actually chose 3 foundations that I have with me, one of which I know is too light for me, one of which I know is too dark right now because I'm not my summer color right now, and then one that has been the closest match that I've found for my skin. It is spring right now, so that might be changing, but we'll see. Now, when you're picking a foundation to match, you want to make sure that you know what you're trying to match. Our face isn't always the same color as the rest of our body. Sometimes our face and our neck might be different colors. You might have hyperpigmentation or differing skin tones throughout your body. You also, if you apply a lot of sunscreen on your face, but you aren't as diligent on your body, in the summer you might be lighter in your face than you are on the rest of your body, and things like that. So making sure that you know what you're trying to match to. I know some people will purposely match to their chest or like their arms if they're going to be exposed because they want to make sure that there is cohesion across their face and their chest, where if they matched to their face, it would be a quite different shade than the rest of their body is. So making sure you want to know what you want to match to. You don't have to match perfectly. Our faces aren't the same color in every spot, which is also why it's not going to be a good idea to just wear foundation alone, because it's going to make us look like we're all one color, and that's not true for our faces and for our bodies. So my skin tone tends to be pretty consistent, so I'm going to be matching to my face mostly. And what I'm going to do is take a foundation and just swatch it right along my jawline. And you'll see already, this is very obviously showing up on my skin, which tells you that it's not a good match because you can really see where the foundation is, which means it's a different color. Now, if I take this next shade, you see, again, the same thing. You can really see where this one is, and you can see that is far too light for me. Even in the winter, I don't know what I was thinking buying this color. But you can see the difference here. This one looks almost like stark white on me, and this one is actually reading really like orange, and that's what we call a warm undertone, where this one is really showing up as like, does not belong on my skin. This one I could probably use to like highlight certain parts of my skin, but we'll get to that when we cover concealers. The last color I'm looking at, I'm putting in the center here. And while you can notice it on my skin, you notice it far less than the other two. It obviously is not as orange as this first one was. It's not as light as this first one was. It is somewhere in the middle of these. And as it sits on my skin, it's less detectable than the other two were. So I went ahead and wiped off those swatches, and I'm actually going to go in with the foundation that I chose as my closest match to show us what it looks like on the full face. And so you'll notice that I pump a little bit onto the back of my hand. I don't apply it directly to my face. And that's because I want to get an even distribution of the product across my face. So I'm actually going to take it on my hand like this, and then just put it onto the brush and tap it in place there before I go in on my skin. And I'm going to apply it by just dabbing in a line basically along my cheekbone to start, and then from there I'm going to blend it out softly. Now this is a medium coverage foundation, so I'm actually going to go in and take a little bit more because it can be a buildable coverage. But I'm going to cover the whole area of most of my face. Notice I'm avoiding under my eyes. I'm going up my nose, but then I'm kind of just following where my cheekbone sits and coming right under here. I'm only purposely doing this half of the face because I'll show you a more full coverage on the other side. And then I can come in with a little bit more on my brush as I want to fill that in. And then with what's left over, I'm going to come up on the forehead, but I don't need a ton of foundation on my forehead, so I'm not going to go in with like a full pump like I was going in to begin. And that's mostly because my forehead has a huge wrinkle across it, so if I have too much foundation on there, it's really not going to look good, and it creases and it gets all messy. So I've learned that I don't need a ton of coverage on my forehead. I don't need a ton of coverage in general. I like a fuller coverage because that's just my aesthetic preference. But lighter on my forehead is what works best for me. And then from there, I'm just going to kind of do little swipes to blend down my jawline and make sure there's not a harsh line. Now with another brush, I'm going to take a really full coverage foundation on the other side of my face. And so I'm doing the same thing, packing it onto the brush. And here I'm going to do the same process, but you'll notice it's a lot more noticeable because it's a fuller coverage product. But I'm still putting it on largely the same way. But with this, I'm not needing to dip back in at all because there's so much product to use. And so again, once the majority of the face is covered, then I'll take what's left over and I'll go up lightly onto my forehead. Same process with both foundations. You can apply your foundation with a brush or with a sponge or with a puff. I covered that when we went over tools. My personal preference is a brush. With a fuller coverage, it does take a little bit longer to blend out and make sure that things are going to be a little more seamless. And that's because when you have more coverage, it's more noticeable where the foundation is and where the pigment is. So depending on the quality of my camera, you might be able to tell the difference between this medium coverage and this really full coverage. There's obviously got to be a little bit of a tone difference because they are different colors and they're different brands, but you'll see this one looks a little more natural and a little more true to what my skin looked like before I put it on, where this one does look a little more like makeup because that's how full coverage works. Now, I obviously didn't go under my eyes because that's where we're going to put concealer, which we will talk about next week. So let me just go put some concealer on so you can see what the full thing looks like. So this is how my face looks with the foundation on. This is the side that has a more medium coverage. This is the side with the fuller coverage. This side you can really see that, like, it does look a little weird when my whole face is one color, and that's where we want to add in some bronzer and or some blush to bring a little more color back into the face and not be all one color. Or all two colors right now, because I did two different foundations for you. In reality, the application of foundation is relatively simple. You could just put it on with your fingers and dab it in. You could use a sponge like I mentioned. You can use the brush. The real trick of foundation is finding one that works best for you. Finding one that sits well on your skin type. Finding one that blends in with your skin tone. And finding one that's going to last as long as you need it to. And so we'll be talking more about how you can set things and how you can add more on top of your foundation in future videos. But for now, we know how to apply some foundation, and hopefully you have a little bit of better sense of what to look for when you're buying a foundation. Sorry, it was bugging me. I had to put on some blush and some bronzer. I'll see you next week as we make up for lost time.